comes from work that we did with Jim Quick, brain power. So I just think it's fascinating, the commonality of all of us in this industry and how we're trying to help others and how important these very typical comments and exercises are, but yet they're still overlooked or underplayed as it relates to the everyday person. So I appreciate you bringing it up again.
It's interesting that they're overlooked. I think it's because it's rejected by so many people who, it's a lot easier to not have to take personal responsibility over things. Mm-hmm. And if you are of the mind, as so many successful people are. I mean, go back to the 1930s and Think and Grow Rich. You talk about the vibrations and you talk about abundance mindset versus scarcity mindset. This stuff's been around for now almost 100 years, right? And he had interviewed people who had been successful for 50 years, so obviously more than a century. Yet so many people look at it as, well, what is that, magic? Is that just hokum? Because if you accept the notion that your mindset can play a huge role in your success or lack of success, then that means that you have to take personal responsibility and accountability for your mindset and your actions. Well, then you got no one to blame, right? Because it's much easier to blame it on the economy. It's much easier to blame it on Trump or Obama or whoever's in office in state capitals or D.C. It's a lot easier to push it off on other people and then just kind of wallow in the corner. And there's a lot of people who like to do that. They become addicted to that. I think I don't know if it's become worse or just more prevalent or more readily available with social media, but there's a lot of what I call them scarcity pimps. They are the people who will, they come in a lot of forms. You go on vacation, right? You're on a nice vacation with your family and you want to share photos with people on social media or in person when you get back, but you think twice of it because there's those people in your family or your friends who will just say, "Oh, must be nice. You must be doing real well. Oh, how'd you get so lucky to make so much money?" To go on vacation. Or they're the people who will just reject outright that your mindset plays a role. They refuse to accept it. And those people can become toxic because they're constantly complaining. They're constantly whining. They're constantly saying they can't do it. And that type of mentality, that scarcity mindset, it's not a victimless crime because not only do you infect those around you, but when you're not at 100%, your family's not going to be at 100%. Your relationships won't be at 100%. Your community doesn't get the best that you have to offer. When you're not successful, you likely pay less in taxes. You have less money to give to the local hospital, local church, And so a lot of people, like to talk about, I heard a line yesterday. Who did it say? They retreat into the collective. And that way they don't have to take personal responsibility. And I'm doing a team workshop on Thursday, and I had this thought. I'm starting off with a slide, and they're probably going to be like, what's he talking about? And it says, there's no I in, and then, there's blank spaces. And, of course, everyone's going to say team, and I'm going to say, right, that's what I'm supposed to start with. I'm a motivational speaker, right? I say, well, I want you to forget that. And I share a quote from Michael Jordan, who gave it during his Hall of Fame acceptance speech, where there was a game where the team wasn't performing that well, so he just took over the game, as he was known to do. And at halftime, he was walking off the court and text winner. I grew up in Chicago, so those Bulls teams were, I lived and died with every game there. And the coach said, Michael, there's no I in team. And he looked at him and said, nope, but there is in win. And if you don't have, if you look at his teams when he finally won, each of the people on those teams, yeah, he was great, but he wouldn't have won without strong individuals. And, Gallup finds that the most successful people are not well-rounded individuals. They're very sharp individuals that use their unique talents and strengths, but the best teams are well-rounded, and they're made up of sharp individuals. And a lot of us are taught to that individualism is bad, So we don't invest in ourselves. Well, I got news for you. If the individuals aren't strong, the team ain't going to be strong either. Even one weak link, obviously, weakens a team. So, everyone, all of us are a work in progress.
Yeah, there's something I pulled off your website, or maybe the intro letter about you. It talked about unleashing your superpowers, but amplifying your strengths instead of fixing your weaknesses.
Right. Yeah. That's, the most popular development model in America, in our society, is deficit-based. Focus on fixing your weaknesses. Well, as I said before, I'm about 5'4", and I'm dating myself, but there was an NBA player who played at least a decade named Muggsy Bogues. He was about 5'4". I guarantee no one ever went up to Muggsy Bogues and said, "Hey, do you play basketball?" Right? He wasn't going to make himself any taller. He was really quick, and he could pass the ball. He could handle the ball. He focused on being the best Muggsy he could be, and it was good enough to be in the NBA. And so a lot of bosses, coaches on the field, parents, 77%, 76 or 77% Gallup finds of parents say that their kids should focus almost solely on the subjects in school in which they perform worst, instead of focusing on the ones in which they do better.
Mm-hmm.
It's not to say you don't talk about the F and the D, right? But why not talk about the fact that your kid might be an incredible poet or an artist? Poets don't have to be math whizzes, and math whizzes don't have to be poets. And I joke around, that's like telling Usain Bolt, you know what, your 100-meter time is excellent. World record, wonderful. But your mile time sucks. So we're not going to let you run the 100 anymore, and you got to focus on the mile. And I say that to audiences, and they laugh, and I'm like, you all do the same thing with yourselves, with your teams, with your businesses, with your kids, where it's focus on fixing them. You don't ignore the weaknesses. I am kind of math illiterate. I'm on my third successful company. I made $1 million several years ago.
Yeah.
I hire math whizzes,
Well, I think it's a good time to say, too, that oftentimes when we look at career paths, we focus on what everybody's telling us instead of what our strengths are. So maybe somebody's pushing us in a direction to take a job or do a job that they think is right for us. But the reality is that's not a strength for us, and we'd be better suited to go focus on our strengths and go after that type of work. And I think really what it gets back to, and you've said a lot about this, is understanding who you are and where you want to go within, those, whether they're your goals or visions in your own life.
Yeah, absolutely. And that not only the notion of focusing on fixing your weaknesses, but everything being so geared. And I think the system is just going to implode here pretty soon. And it'll be a good thing. There's going to be a lot of pain, financial and otherwise. And I'm talking about the schooling system, where it's all geared toward college ready. And you got kindergartens canceling theater programs, right? And you have people at 45 years old who come to me and you who are like, I went into finance because my dad told me to go into finance, but I hate finance.
Yeah.
Because everything is funneled through that college prep, SAT, PSAT, you got to take the test, standardize the test. No one ever asks, we got kids, right? You got kids, I got kids. At some point, people stop asking kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? And we stop asking that to ourselves, because after age 12, it's like, well, who cares? You just got to graduate and go get your degree, and you're going to go into a safe, something safe that gives you a good paycheck. And it all becomes about that paycheck. And listen, I love money, but I look at it a lot different than I used to.
Yeah. As you should. I've got one more question about some of the research I did on you before we wrap this thing up. I realize we're almost done 40 minutes now, and I just appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love a line I read somewhere within your stuff is work-life balance is BS.
Yeah.
Please tell.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about that tightrope before, right? Here's how a lot of people look at work-life balance. And here's how I did it. And when I bring this up in audiences, there's so many people who are like, yep, that's me. It's, okay, well, for the next 2 weeks, I'm working on this project. I'm going to put my head down, and I'm going to eat garbage literally and figuratively, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to eat junk food. I'm not going to work out. You know what? I'm barely going to see my wife or husband. I'm barely going to see my kids, right? But when that 2 weeks is up, it'll all be worth it. It'll all balance out, because then I'll come home early and I'll take my wife or daughter out, or I'll take my kids out, whatever. Now, if that happens at the end of 2 weeks, that's a big if. Often that 2 weeks turns into 6 months. I just got to make it through this 6 months. Turns into 5 or 10 years. Like the people who told me, yeah, I know, I wish I could do what you did. I just got to get through this next 5 years, right? You need that next $2,000, that next $4,000, whatever it is. And then it often turns into the 65-year plan, which is, well, when I retire at 65, then your mother and I are going to travel the world. Just in my family, heart attack, prostate cancer, knee replacement, stroke. Between the ages of 64 and 66.
Wow.
So there's no guarantee that you or I are going to be alive tomorrow morning, much less at age 65, yet so many people look at balance in the wrong way. I mean, it's what I said earlier. You can't separate work and life. I mean, you just can't. That's a recipe for disaster. There's just life. I mean, whether you're sleeping or awake, you're living, right? But if you spend your life waiting instead of living, you're never going to get that holy grail that you think is out there at 40 or 45 or 50 or 55 or 65, whatever that is. So it's not about balance. It's about aligning your life to, according to those three facets, relationships, work, and self, in a way that works for you. And, for me, I try to set a limit of working 12 to 14 hours a week. But I don't prescribe that for anyone. You can work 20 hours a week and still be in alignment, right? It just depends on where I got 4 young kids. When my kids leave, maybe I work a little bit more and spend the rest of my time just with my wife. The alignment can change for you when the alignment is right. It's like going to a chiropractor, right? You get your back aligned.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need an x-ray to know that it feels right and things are flowing better in your life. But I had someone, and you brought this up earlier in terms of the kids and spending time with your kids. So I was talking about this on an online Q&A, and an entrepreneur said, 12 to 14 hours a week, what do you just lay around on a couch for the rest of the time? I said, is that what you think I do? I said, my days are chock full, but I'm not busy. They're full of things I actually want to do, and a lot of people haven't put in again, it's that daily work to figure out, if you weren't working, what would you do?
Yeah.
Would you read a couple books? Would you go to the beach with your kids? Would you just spend some time with your kids? Would you go out to lunch with your wife? And so you haven't identified those things outside of work that fulfill you. So you can't even identify how to fill that time, that gap. And so that alignment instead of balance is so important.
So important. Well, I think that's a great message for our listeners as we head into a new year, 2020. And we start thinking about getting in alignment with ourselves. And this is that time of year where people want to lose weight or have their goals and ambitions written down on paper. And I encourage everybody to do that. Curt, I know you've got a book out, or at least you can receive the first chapter by going through your website. Can you tell us about that and how we can get a hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely. If you go to 5pillarsoffreedom.com, you can get chapter 1 of my book, 5 Pillars of the Freedom Lifestyle. In that book, I tell about my story. The first part of the book tells the stories of individuals who broke free from being suicidal to running, ultra marathons around Mount Everest, to people who are helping people from age 15 and up, and other people to break free and build a life of purpose. And then the second half is the 5 pillars, which we've talked about: superpowers, vision, alignment, outcomes, and flow, how to adapt those 5 pillars to your life to be free and fulfilled.
And by the way, you've got a wonderful website. It's curtmercadante.com. And you talk about your workshops on there and working with you and performance coaching and all those other things. So I would encourage people to visit you over there as well and learn more about what you're offering. I can tell you're probably a great coach and somebody to work with. I love your content and where your mentality is on all the things that we have in common, of course. And I really appreciate you sharing them on the show today.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's been a pleasure. It's been a fun conversation, and I'm going to listen to that, Sugar Ray. We're a boxing family.
Good.
In fact, this Saturday I'm emceeing. I'm the local ring announcer here for a boxing gym, and earlier this year I had Ray Mercer, who was a former heavyweight champion. He came And he came to our boxing show, and I had him on the podcast. So I love that you had Sugar Ray on. That's awesome.
I won't give away the whole show, but what I like the most about Sugar Ray is that